Hello, BookTube. I've got a little bit of mail for you to start off a Wednesday. We've got a periodical and a couple of packages. And the periodical is the Times Literary Supplement, the TLS, which has a lot of interest in it. One of those things being this first thing, Some Men in London, a 2-volume set from Penguin Classic. I don't recall this being offered in the American book market. I don't know if it will be next year. About gay life in London, over just anthology pulled together by the author Peter Parker about gay men in London over the course of, it looks like, the 20th century. Very much like to get that set. I don't know if it'll come out in America, but the main attraction of this particular number of the TLS is the books of the year, where they, let me show you what I mean in case you're not familiar with it. They ask a whole bunch of their regular contributors to write just 100 words about some of the books that stood out to them in their reading this year. Don't have to be new releases, don't have to be their own bailiwick of a subject matter or anything like that, just what stuck out to them. The TLS has been doing this forever. I love reading it because the authors generally don't know what each other is writing about, and so it's fascinating to me to see which books crop up in different authors. Sometimes there are some years where none do. Some are more predictable than others. Some of their authors every year strike the same insufferable tone about how they really didn't do any reading this year at all, and I always want to stop and tell those people, well, that's your job, and so what you're doing is you're saying that you're bad at your job. And others do predictable left turns. Mary Beard, for instance, their on-staff classicist, never writes about books. She always writes about museum catalogs, illustrated museum catalogs. I guess a lot of first-rate writing is done in those catalogs, but like a lot of people who read the year-end list, I want to know what a lot of these authors read in the last year. And she never says what she read, unless she does it elsewhere. Maybe she has a blog of her own where she does. But the overall impression of books of the year that I usually get in the TLS from their bigger names confirms a troubling suspicion that I have always had, which is that the more high profile you are as a literary figure, the less reading you do until finally, when you are extremely well known or you've got it made, you don't do any reading at all. That is something you did a long time ago, and you have stopped. So you still write, but you don't do any reading at all. You never read. I know that's not universal, but I get that strong suspicion, especially with some of the literary poobahs, the bigger names that I have met. They get all wistful and teary-eyed when the subject of free-range reading comes up because they don't do it anymore, and act like that's someone else's decision. But it's still fascinating to me to see which, is there a book or a couple of books that crop up unrehearsed in a number of different accounts by a number of different authors, and invariably in most years there will be, and then it's just a question of, is that a book that I've read, or is that a book that's out only in the UK that I won't have any access to until it comes here. But anyway, it's always fascinating to me. It's a prelude, it's a preface to the only truly great books of the year list that exists. This is haphazard. After all, you don't know from one entry to the next whether or not an author is going to talk about something they read when they were 13 years old and found a copy at a flea market and read it again, or whether or not they're going to talk about a new release, or whether or not they're going to talk about a new release only because their friend wrote it or because their dead friend wrote it. And you move from an admittedly idiosyncratic list like that to lists from places like the Washington Post or the New York Times of the year's best books that are done by committee. They're done by a group of editors all conferring together. They're done according to all sorts of non-literary measuring tests. Do we have enough of X category of human beings? Do we have enough of Y category of human beings in here, regardless of the worth of the book? So that if there were a year, let's say, just hypothetically, if there were a year in which the top 30 best books were all written by men, well, 15 of those books would not be on the Times list. Even though the editorial staff would agree, they would still leave them off in order for demographic representation to be more even, as if that's the way talent is doled out. And not only that, but that group of editors will also, I suspect, have one eye fixed on the marketing department, on who's buying full color ads. Or who's as the phrase always goes in the industry, who's a friend of the paper. In other words, compromised, as if the American reading public needed, and the smart American reading public needed any more convincing that the mainstream media is not to be trusted. Not a single word. If they write an article on the front page saying the sky is blue, go outside and check. They are not to be trusted on anything. And when it comes to books that only barely anybody reads and nobody cares about, I would think that you'd be kind of crazy to take those kinds of lists at face value just because of the name of the premature of the journal. Whereas I do a year-end book list every year that is just me. And I am not biddable. I cannot be bought. I am not compromised in any way. My reading is extremely wide and extremely eclectic. And also I am willing, unlike any other major journal, I'm willing to stand by my recommendations. My first line of defense for my recommendations is to urge you to go and test them. Go and find out. Find a book that I have wholeheartedly recommended. See if I'm not right. I firmly believe that in 95% of cases like that, you will find that I am. I have not become bored or jaded or cynical with the book world. Every time I open a new book, I open it with incredible amounts of childlike wonder. I want it to be that book. I want it to do that thing that we want every book to do. If you surrender your critical faculties, every book will do it. But if you don't, and you shouldn't, then only a handful of them will. But you know what I mean. You know what you want a book to do. You want it to transport you. Kind of a cheesy word, but it still works. You want it to lift you up out of yourself. You want it to cancel time. You want it to cancel heartbreak. You want it to cancel tedium, certainly, but even a boring book will usually do that. You want it to set your mind on fire, set the short hairs on your skin on end. You want every book to be a book, the kind of book where when you finish with it, you have two immediate impulses. One, to just sit down and read the whole thing again. And two, to rush outside and grab the nearest reader and insist that they give it a try. Oh my God, you've got to read this book. A lot of my fellow critics in the critical world have lost that feeling. If they ever had it, they've lost it. I don't know what they want now. I guess it's just to fight off tedium. But the more you surrender to tedium, the stronger it gets, not the less it gets. So a lot of critics that I read a lot. I read a lot of my fellow critics. A lot of them, I don't get the impression that they have ever opened a book in the last 25 years with that kind of slate clearing, open mind of, I know you're an author I don't like. I know there's a genre I don't like, but I want you to wow me. So I'm wide open to that. I don't get the impression that many critics do that. And when that goes away, what takes its place inevitably is an agenda, a critical agenda of some kind. And a critic with an agenda like that, with an aesthetic agenda, is worthless. They might as well hang up their pen. They are worthless. They are not serving the only person in the equation that they should serve, which is their audience, their readers. And my list is free of that. So, and also it's all filtered through one reading sensibility, which is not true for any other year-end book list. They're all done by committee, either this way explicitly or behind the scenes at something like the Times or the Post or the LA Times, where it's a number of people who've been consulted. They have had meetings about their list, but it's not just one person. Well, you might say that's great for variety, but a good reader will be reading variety anyway, and all the other things that brings to the table are bad because you don't know. Did one editor read only 3 books this year? Has one editor surrendered their critical faculties? I read plenty of part-time reviewers in plenty of newspapers that certainly seems to me like they haven't read a book critically in a long time. And if they don't assess a book critically, then they're not serving you. If they're doing handsprings over a third-rate piece of garbage, when you get to that third-rate piece of garbage with their handsprings in mind, you're going to be disappointed. My list doesn't have that. My list is just the. My list is the top 10 picks that I have read in the 15 or 16 genres that I read, that interest me. And I read a lot more than just those picks, as you know if you watch this channel. My reading is endless and it sprawls over the disciplines. Sometimes the publishing world lets me down. Sometimes I don't have the full complement of categories in a year. Sometimes I look at a category, let's say fantasy novels, in the mainstream press in the United States in one given year, and I realized that not only did I not read any good books, but I didn't read any even passable ones, and not enough to make 10. Not enough to make a list of 10. Sometimes that does happen, but anyway, this made me think of that because my list is coming up. It'll start category by category. It'll start on the 1st of December and go until we run out of categories. And the final 4, the big 4, as one publishing friend of mine called it years ago, is worst fiction and best fiction, worst nonfiction and best nonfiction. So it's general fiction and general nonfiction, not the specialities of nonfiction like history or biography, and not the specialities of fiction like romance or mystery novels, but just general fiction and general nonfiction are the 2 categories on my list where I include not only a best list, but a worst list of the worst books that are out there. And since most of these kinds of lists, again, are keeping one eye firmly fixed on the marketing and advertising department, most of them don't have a worst list. Especially not a worst list with candidates on the lists of major publishing houses. That just doesn't happen. Usually, it just doesn't happen, and it does on my list. So that's coming up. Just a FYI. But let's look at the packages here. We have 2 packages. One, no boxes this time around. One of the packages is heavier than the other, and I know what I want that to be. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, how interesting. Oh, right. All right. I think I was contacted about this by the publisher. Is this year? Yeah, this is the 10th of December. What a weird time to bring out a book. This is What in Me is Dark by Orlando Reed. The subtitle is The Revolutionary Afterlife of Paradise Lost. How interesting. I forgot about this. A highly original hybrid of literary criticism and political history, telling of the enduring, surprising, and ever-evolving relevance of Milton's epic poem through the scandalous life of its creator and the revolutionary lives that were influenced by it. Oh, wow. This book tells the unlikely story of how Milton's epic poem came to haunt political struggles over the past 4 centuries, including the many different, unexpected, often contradictory ways in which it had been read, interpreted, and appropriated through time and across the world, and to revolutionary ends. I'm not going to talk about American politics, surely. There's never been anyone in American politics who's read this book since John Quincy Adams. The book focuses on 12 readers. Okay, who have we got here? Including Malcolm X, Thomas Jefferson, George Eliot, Hannah Arendt, and C.L.R. James, whose lives demonstrate extraordinary and disturbing influence on the modern age. Okay, that's fascinating. George Eliot and Milton. I'm trying to chase that down. I'm trying to piece out the web work there just off the top of my head. Malcolm X, I don't know. Hannah Arendt, I'm pretty sure I know where that chapter will go. But George Eliot. Okay, all right. So who is the author? studied at Cambridge and Princeton, where he received a PhD in English literature in 2020. Okay. All right. For a period of 5 years, he taught in New Jersey prisons. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I'd love to talk to him about that experience. Wow. He's now assistant professor of English at Northeastern University in London. And his writing has appeared in publications including The Guardian and The White Review, where he also served as a contributing editor. Okay, well, this comes out on the 10th of December. What in Me is Dark. Okay, I opened it to put the pub sheet in, and I opened it to the chapter on George Eliot, which is intriguingly titled "George Eliot Sees Her First Man." Oh, I have a feeling I'm really going to like this. Okay. Well, I don't talk a lot about Paradise Lost on this channel, but I absolutely love it. So that's great. Great, fantastic. All right, so a book for this year, and then we have the second one. It is heavier. That leads me to think maybe it's a finished copy, and I know what finished copy I want. I haven't got it yet. Every finished copy that I get, I keep hoping. Oh, all right, and it is. This is the finished copy that I want. Great. And you are also a December release, yeah, the 3rd of December. This is the finished copy of The Last Tsar by Tsuyoshi Hasegawa. About the fall of Nicholas II, his abdication, the politics behind it. Great. Okay, I have a finished copy here. That's fantastic. I've already read this. I thought it was really, really good, and also unexpected. This is such an easy story to tell. That's why there've been 100,000 books on this subject. It's such an easy story to tell that I wasn't expecting this book to do what it did. It takes its time writing, delving the details of the politics, the military, of the abdication of Nicholas II, basically signing his own death warrant, as opposed to the melodrama of Ekaterinburg and the armed men entering the room and Anastasia and all that. Instead of all that, it concentrates more on the mechanics involved. Let's see. Let's read this again. It's been a while since we saw this. The Russian Empire entered the 20th century both blessed and cursed. Modernity was reinventing all aspects of life. Cars ran alongside horse-drawn carriages, and sumptuous palaces constructed in the 18th century were refurbished with new technologies, like laying on the gas, indoor plumbing, that sort of thing. Banks, the stock exchange, and luxury shops bustled. At the same time, an increasingly discontented middle class clamored for political participation. To rule over this vast, dynamically changing empire would have been a challenging task for any leader, and unfortunately for Russia, no one was more ill-equipped than Tsar Nicholas II. And that's a thread that runs throughout this book, is that the author just never lets up on Nicholas II. Intriguing, very intriguing observations about Nicholas II all throughout here. You would think that would mean that Nicholas is the villain of the book. But A, this is a more complex book than something that would have villains. And B, if there's a villain, it's Alexandra, his wife, who really, aside from rolling bandages for the Red Cross, she really does not come off well in this book. In this book, the author shows how Nicholas's poor leadership and attachment to archaic notions of autocracy led to the end of the Romanov dynasty. He brings to life the most captivating personalities of the era: the bumbling Nicholas, his spiteful wife Alexandra, the family faith healer Rasputin, and untangles the dramatic struggle by Russia's aristocratic military and legislative elite to reform the monarchy. By rejecting compromise, Nicholas repeatedly missed crucial opportunities to renegotiate Romanov power that would have left the monarchy intact, even if diminished. I really, really enjoyed this. Great to have the finished copy. Those of you who have read maybe Massey's book, Nicholas and Alexandra, or any of his follow-ups to that, or any of the other books on the end of the Romanovs and Tsar Nicholas II, you might think that you're all played out on the subject, but no. This will really repay your reading. It's really quite good. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's two finished copies here then. Both December. What are the odds of that? That now I would be getting December books, but that's great. I don't even have a December bookshelf anymore. My bookshelf is now entirely collecting next year. So there you go. Two finished copies. One we never got the advanced copy, but that's from Astra House. So The Last Tsar about Nicholas II, and What in Me is Dark about Paradise Lost. Not only in Milton's life, but in the life of a handful of other figures like Thomas Jefferson or Malcolm X. How fascinating. How utterly fascinating. So one piece of nonfiction that I have read but will eagerly reread tonight, and another that I have not read that I will read tonight. So there you go. That is the mail for Wednesday. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.